The Razer Blade base model 15 from 2021 is a mixed bag. One, it's still the same great body design and price to performance model that we've seen before. 1.1 though, is still the same body design and price to performance model that we've seen before. However, I have taken to using this as my primary Windows machine for the past 30 days, so let's see what I've liked and what I haven't liked in that time. So, how does it shake out? Let's find out. It didn't even shut. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. When it comes to these follow-up videos, there probably won't be all of that much difference from the initial follow-up. What I like doing these at certain intervals in case any major firmware changes or hardware issues have come up during that extended time frame. Let's be frank, with the way technology goes anymore, you can never have a definitive quote-unquote review of something because one software update could totally change the performance of a laptop, tablet, phone, etc. And it could do that for better or for worse. So, on to the Razer Blade 15. Let's talk about the refined things that I've both liked and disliked after the past month. And much like that last video, let's start off with the negative. We gotta kick it in the teeth while it's down, right? The biggest negative I have about the Razer Blade 15 isn't necessarily Razer's fault, and it's not something that's regulated or specifically unique to Razer. I'm not honing in on Razer when I say this, but the continued use of the 10750H processor, it just sucks. They've been using this singular processor in this 15-inch model since early 2020, and even before that, they were using the 9750H, which, yes, it's a year older than the 10 series, but it scores very, very similarly. Those two processors have the same core count, the same 45-watt power limit, and have almost exactly the same performance. So for all intents and purposes, if you bought a 2019 version of the Razer Blade 15, which coincidentally also has the 2060 graphics card, you're basically getting the same thing, and then here you go, just another small incremental change. It's so egregious how little Intel has moved the ball that I considered scrapping this whole video. I considered not even doing this 1 month later. I was going to make a video called "You Should Not Buy a 2021 Intel-Based Gaming Laptop." I still might do that. Leave me a comment below if you'd like to see me rant for a whole video. If you want to see me put all of this positivity and just rant for a video, leave me a comment down below. Something that I could do very easily in this video to crush this laptop is bring up that dreaded M1 word, and it would easily outpace this if you were looking for a hybrid creation / productivity machine. But I don't need to do that today because I can find something that makes these Intel chips look like they are moving in slow motion from within Windows itself. The comparison and rivalry is coming from within the ecosystem. And that's the Ryzen series of processors. Even those ones from last year are still crushing it. Now, AMD's already gone ahead and announced the 2021 roadmap of their processors, and from both avenues, the 5000H and the 5000U series of Ryzen processors, Intel doesn't seem to stand a chance. I mean, look at that Asus G17 that we checked out about a month ago, and yes, we will have its 1 month later video out here shortly. That has the Ryzen 5900HX processor and the new NVIDIA graphics card, and it absolutely just, I'm trying to think of a word that's not just smashes. It just like mauls this Intel chip. I don't exactly want this whole video to turn into a discussion about AMD versus Intel, but those new Ryzen processors compare very closely when we look at single core performance. You know, the one thing that Intel's had going for it for the past few years, but it utterly just swipes it away. Wipes it off the board when it comes to multi-core performance, and in my opinion, that balance of having good single core and amazing multi-core makes for a more useful computer. And, yes, we have a double and here, they both cost roughly the same amount, with that G17 having a better constructed body. Long story long, it's not necessarily Razer's fault that their processors are currently some of the weakest on the market, but it would be very nice to start seeing a few of the Blade options with an AMD SKU. I mean, even Dell has been branching out with the 4000 series of Ryzen chips with their budget Dell G15 SE gaming laptop, and it was totally okay. And even Dell, if Dell's doing it, Razer, you guys should do it too. That was a pretty large section of the video dedicated to that first dislike, but I think it's important. If you are buying a gaming laptop, you're probably doing so because you need the power and the thermal regulation a larger chassis can afford. But here, it's not all that powerful compared to what else is on the market. Besides that though, the only other thing I continue to dislike is the thing that I always say I dislike about Razer laptops. I hate whatever material they use on this body. This is the most fingerprint attracting substance that I've ever come across. It didn't bother me so much on last year's model because I immediately put a wrap on it and I never needed to think about it again. But this year I decided to leave it like this because if I'm going to recommend it or I'm going to say, hey, maybe you should get one, I should probably use it the way in that you all would use it. And I gotta tell you, this is absolutely driving me crazy. Every single time I touch the laptop, there is a fingerprint. Doesn't matter how clean my hands are, doesn't matter how clean the laptop is, it will smudge. And even moving it, like even when I move it from this desk over there to take the thumbnail, it will get at least 1 or 2 fingerprints on it. And it just looks like a smudgy, ugly, mess. If it could like operate with some kind of transparent solid air barrier around it that could let me handle the computer without ever touching it, you know, like the kids do, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, laptop. If they could do that, it would be so much better. Or instead of that like fantasy, magical, science fiction stuff, just use a different material to make the laptop. Please. I normally do not like to focus on the negatives of a piece of technology so much, but this is coming to the point where if a laptop has Intel inside of it in 2021, I'm not planning on talking about it. It's just boring, and it's exactly the same for the last few years, while other manufacturers are actually taking some pretty big leaps forward. But it's not all doom and gloom. Let's refine those things that I liked about this computer. So on the one side of performance, we have the pretty meh CPU, which is the same as last year's model, but on the other hand, we have the NVIDIA 3060 graphics card. And no, it doesn't have mind-shatteringly overpowered performance, but it does make for a nice little boost over that last year's 2060 model. You all know that I'm not one for benchmarks because there are a gigantic number of videos out there that will give you each benchmark down to the nitty-gritty details. And because numbers on a graph have never actually gotten my work done for me, no matter how much I yell at that Excel sheet. And look, as an aside, I yell at those Excel sheets a lot, and nothing ever changes. Nothing ever changes. But for the power of this graphics card, I think we can easily see how well it works from a creative perspective. If we take a 4K 10-bit high-efficiency file and render it out to a 4K 8-bit file that we would upload to social media like YouTube or something, and we do that through a program like DaVinci Resolve, this will hold pretty good at roughly 60 frames per second rendering. That's actually really good and compares very favorably to computers that cost much more or even full-on desktop rigs. That's 60 frames per second is what I consider to be twice real-time rendering, or it takes half the amount of time to render that out. And that's the high bar for creative laptops. So if you're looking for what I would consider to be the best, this actually gives you that highest bar. Also, if you are a gamer, you know, the reason to get a gaming laptop, this combo also holds really well on its own. My 3 generally test to see how well one of these laptops holds up is Witcher 3 at max settings, Half-Life Alyx at whatever settings the laptop can hold on to. That is a tough graphical game. And World of Warcraft, since it's the only game I apparently have played for most of my adult life. You'll see that with WoW Classic, it can keep up at 100 frames per second without any issue, because that game is ancient at this point. It seems to also easily run Half-Life Alyx, which this computer has become my mobile VR rig because of how well it works with those games, and Witcher 3 holds up, no major problems for it. All in all, I do like the graphical prowess on the Razer Blade base model 15. It holds up well to the kinds of tasks that I do, and even when under load, I haven't had very many issues. Leading me into that next thing I like, thermal performance. Historically speaking, for me, there are computers that have and computers that have not had thermal problems when I give them a shot. The Razer laptops have never given me a problem. This takes a load off my mind because thermal performance is easily the most important aspect of a laptop. All of those specs that we already talked about, they do not matter if you don't get to use all of their capabilities because the system is so hot that it limits their power. Thankfully, I haven't had any issues thus far with any of the 15-inch Razer laptops. They do seem to have a pretty serious cooling system, and while it can get pretty loud when the fans kick into full blast or something like that Half-Life Alyx run, or they'll also kick up when you're doing a video editing render, the fans do a good job of keeping the processor relatively cool. I kind of wish they standardized the vapor chamber seen in the advanced models down to the base model, but we're not using an 8-core processor or the 3080 graphics card, so maybe it is just the right amount of cooling. The engineers probably know what they're doing. It would be nice to see the vapor chamber as like an incremental move forward in the technology. Like, look here, our higher end stuff is coming down to the lower end instead of the exact same thing. I want to point out that I did say relatively cool earlier because the laptop still does get pretty darn warm to the touch when it's under load, and you will not be able to really use this on your lap. You know, kind of like the name means, laptop. So it's not a laptop, it's a desktop, it's a mobile desktop lap computer. Something like that. If you sit on your bed or on your couch, this will become quite uncomfortable quite fast. I also continue to really like all of the I/O available on the 15-inch base model. Look, it is really easy to say good things about most gaming computers' assortment of ports. On this one, you'll get Thunderbolt 3, 3 USB-A, a USB-C, Ethernet, HDMI. This is basically the perfect amount of I/O. Sure, we're missing the SD card slot, which you can get on that advanced model, but we've been lacking these kind of ports for so long, it's really easy and cheap to find an adapter. Plus, who besides YouTubers and maybe a professional photographer or videographer really need an SD card? Look, I'll complain about it all day to keep my YouTube street cred card, but honestly, nobody but us is missing it. However, HDMI and a full assortment of USB-A for all of those accessories that will apparently never move past USB-A. I'm looking at you, keyboard and mice manufacturers. This is what you need. You don't need a dongle, you don't need a dock, you don't need anything to plug this into a desk setup at any time and just get going. Well, you'll need to buy that desk setup, but baby steps, baby steps. Other things that I continue to like about the Razer, I still like the high refresh rate display. That doesn't really matter as much for creation or regular use, but when playing games, it's nice to actually see the difference all of those specs buy you. And don't feel bad. If you're using a lower refresh rate monitor, but you've got a pretty powerful machine, don't feel bad. I've also gotten really excited about the frame rates on one of my games, only to realize that I'm using a 30 Hz refresh rate monitor. Life makes fools of us all. I also really like the upgradeability of this laptop. You can fit another M.2 SSD into the open spot on the bottom, and you can even upgrade the RAM up to 64 gigabytes if you so choose. While I'm not an expert on Wi-Fi chips, this also looks like you can replace that too if, during the course of ownership of this laptop, we get another advancement in wireless technology. It is nice to have the ability to not pay the OEM premium for parts that you can get much cheaper and of much better quality on your own. Plus, it only takes a few moments to upgrade. So why wouldn't you do it? Go do it. It's so easy. And when it comes to upgrading, it's vastly easier to take off the bottom of the Razer laptops than it is any of the Dell laptops. Those Dell XPS computers are such a huge pain in the butt to open up. And if something is a huge pain in the butt, odds are you probably won't do it. I know I certainly won't. And the last thing that I really like is that we kept roughly the same price between the model years. Razer didn't try and upsell us just because of the new graphics card inside of here, and if their website is right, the 2021 model is actually $100 cheaper than when the 2020 version first came out. But I don't have a screenshot of what it originally looked like, so if somebody out there has a screenshot or a picture of the actual price of the 2020 model when it came out, just tweet at me showing me, because their site now has it at $17.99 but discounted down. But I don't actually know what it was. But at the end of the day, so what, right? Should you get the 3060 version of the Razer Blade base model 15 from 2020? This is a fine laptop. This is actually a perfectly fine laptop, and it would be very feasible as some sort of a do-it-all creation, gaming, travel laptop. And since the G17 has been giving me problems for my VR stuff, this laptop has actually gotten a lot of use from me in the past 30 days. However, I still don't think it's a big enough upgrade to buy new unless you just have to have the newest model. A quick Amazon search shows me that the 2060 version with the same processor can be had for a couple of $100 cheaper, or even that 2019 model with the processor that's almost as powerful with the 2060 graphics card can be had for even less. If you were to look for my personal recommendation, I'd probably recommend to you the 1075 with the 2060 model. It just seems to be that sweet spot of lower price point, but a lot of the same performance. Razer makes some pretty good stuff, but they are absolutely being held back by their choice in chips. So here's hoping that soon they'll start releasing some computers, even if it's just a special line that comes with Ryzen processors. And if you liked this video and you're like, Gary, I'm still going to go out there and buy me the Razer Blade from 2021. If you'd like to see the unboxing and my initial impressions of this, because you are going to go out and get one, you can find that video by clicking right here. Click, 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 click. I can never do that with a straight face. Thanks for watching.